Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time we're talking the Gotham episode, The Balloonman. And overall, I like this episode a pretty fair bit. There are a few things that I didn't like that much, but generally thinking this feels like a pretty solid episode. They're really juggling the characters in this show really well. I'm very impressed. I mean, we get a little bit of everybody, and this is a show with a pretty darn big cast, but everybody's scenes are important, or in some way flesh them out as characters. And yet, despite all of this, the show still manages to kind of keep going with the idea that the main protagonist here is Jim Gordon. So it's a very delicate balancing act, but so far Gotham has pulled it off pretty well. So let's kind of just talk about the characters, and then we'll talk about the bigger picture too a little bit. So let's kind of start off with the bad guys, and I just noticed in the background. Let's start with Fish Mooney. In her restaurant, you can see like a giant fishbone design on one of the walls. I guess this is probably meant to be the logo of her restaurant, and actually reminds me of a little bit of the opening, like when you see the fishbone in the opening to the old Heathcliff cartoon from the 80s. I know I'm dating myself pretty badly there, but that's what it reminded me of. But what I like about that is you can kind of think of that symbol as Fish Mooney's symbol, kind of like how Batman has the bat symbol. You can kind of think of that as her symbol. I mean, obviously they're never going to do anything as overt on as that on Gotham, but still, it's thematically the bad guy having a little bit of a logo, sort of like the Riddler in question marks. It just fits. Now, Fish, not a huge amount to say about her this episode. It just continues to drive home that Fish is an extraordinarily ruthless person. She sends that one thug to disfigure Falcone's new girlfriend, and then orders her former boy toy to be disposed of once she's decided that he's lost his spine. And her definition of that is apparently genuinely caring about her. And then we have another scene with her and Falcone where they're kind of doing that dance around each other. This is like watching two predators, two jungle animals, circle each other, kind of deciding whether or not they're gonna strike. And that's really basically what's going on. Now, Falcone probably suspects that maybe Fish sent somebody to mess with his girlfriend, but he doesn't know that for sure. And now he's got Maroni gearing up for a move against him. And he can't. So basically, he's in a situation where he can't afford to move against Fish unless he's 100% sure she's getting ready to jam a knife in his back. Now, granted, he's probably figured out that she's probably planning to do that anyway, but the question is she going to jam a bright knife in my back today, or is she going to try and jam a knife in my back next week? And if she's not going to do it until next week, well, until then, I'm going to make use of her. That's the kind of guy that Falcone is, at least in my read of him. Now, as I said, I just mentioned Maroni, and this is another character from the comics. Here he's played by David Zayas, who most people are going to know as Angel from Dexter. I reviewed Dexter for a couple of seasons, so I'm very familiar with his work, and he's a great actor. I was very excited when I heard that he was going to be on the show. Now he's playing Salvador the Boss Maroni, and I have to say that little bit where he's talking to Cobblepot and goes, "You don't look Italian." I was like, I guess that kind of stream is being a little bit funny given that David Zayas is Puerto Rican, but eh, you know, characters who in the comics are Caucasian being played by Hispanic actors. Nothing new here on Gotham. See Sarah Essen if you've not been paying attention on that front. But anyway, we only get a very basic read on Maroni this episode, but we see that he's, again, an ambitious crime boss, and that he's nobody's fool. Now, but now that Cobblepot is working in his restaurant, well, this is maybe a potential place where Oswald can kind of build himself up a power base. Something tells me that neither Maroney or Fish Mooney are going to survive this first season. After all, as I saw somebody on Tumblr point out, penguins eat fish. And while that might be playing things a little bit heavily, you gotta admit it is true in just terms of good old-fashioned nature. And well, in the comics, the penguin is in fact often depicted as eating fish, often with very poor table manners, especially and just a little bit of the Batman Returns influence there. So anyway, Cobblepot. Now this episode just continues to show that he's become very comfortable with violence. He's become comfortable with ruthlessness. I mean, he kills a guy for his shoes, just so that so that he can take his job. But it does show that the Penguin does have that ruthlessness and that cleverness and that willingness to just do whatever it takes to get what he wants, and his ability to manipulate people to get what he wants. I mean, he gets his foot in the door there with Maroney. He shows him like, yeah, I'm just the dishwasher here, but you can count on my loyalty. So, that's a kind of a situation where maybe he can sort of exploit that into moving up the ranks, because he's not going to be able to hide behind I'm Paolo the dishwasher for very long. I mean, he is known in the Gotham underworld, and this I think is what leads to that whole scene at the end, which completely shocked the hell out of me. And I love when shows do that, where he shows up on Gordon's door and he's like, "Hey, bro." Now, as we saw from the previews, Gordon is not going to take too kindly to this, but really, what was the Penguin going to do? I mean, they give the sort of justification in the show that this Gotham is my home, I love it here. But let's face it, the show wouldn't be very interesting if the Penguin, if he climbed out of the river and immediately started hitchhiking to Mexico. Well, really, there wouldn't have been much of a story there. So, just in terms of what the Batman mythos and what makes an interesting story demand, well, that is that he comes back to Gotham. I mean, yeah, it would have been interesting to see him hanging out in that trailer in the sticks, kind of planning for a little bit longer, but then, because people today have absolutely no freaking patience, people would have been like, oh, when is the Penguin going to come back to Gotham? God. You know, I do love doing these reviews, but let me say something. Years ago, I had to take a class in college um, to get my cultural credit or whatever, and I ended up getting stuck taking a theater class. And the professor who was in charge of it said that one of the things that he really hated about really being experienced with theater is because he knew a lot about how theater worked. It made it harder for him to enjoy plays and stuff because he could just pick apart all the little flaws. And people who write novels and write screenplays and all that sort of thing, they basically make the same complaint. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I'm anywhere near on the level of people who are professionals at this, but I've been doing this for a while, and I do know a thing or two about storytelling, just from my own experiences. And this is one of the things that drives me crazy as a fan dealing with the reaction of other people, is just people who just don't get how storytelling works and just refuse to let stories breathe on their own. And it just drives me absolutely crazy. And now that I've taken time to complain about out of this review to complain about fandom, let's get back to things. Bad guys. Not a huge amount to say about the Balloonman. He's not a character from the comics that I'm aware of, but his shtick is very much something that you really would find in a Batman comic. And I saw some people online kind of complaining that this seems very over the top, and this show is supposed to be grounded in reality. Well, yeah, it is. But you know what it's also supposed to be? It's also supposed to be frickin' Batman. All right, in reality, crime in America is the lowest it's been in decades. Episode 1 of Gotham, what do we see Bullock holding up the newspaper? Crime wave of the century. The normal rules don't apply to Gotham. And while, yes, this show is intended to be grounded in reality, that sort of over the top craziness is endemic of just comic books and Batman is not going to be totally absent. No, I don't think we're going to see people running around in tights and capes like that, but just some of the exaggerated reality, shall we say, is going to be present. Obviously not to the level of the comics, but it's going to be there. Like, for example, okay, yes, the whole thing that the Balloonman has going on, that's pretty crazy. What's even more crazy is that something like this, and remember, the first one of these murders happened in front of a TV crew, that this would not be international news. So this is the idea that the cops can just kind of blow this off. It's like, yeah, whatever, he's a scumbag, who cares? No, man, this would be like getting millions of views on YouTube, international attention. There's no way that the press and the cops would just whatever. I mean, that's stupid. And that is one of my biggest criticisms of this episode. So let's move on to the other characters. This episode we get to finally see Alfred taking a more gentle approach. Just him having that cool little sword fight with Bruce, and goofing around and constantly insisting that Bruce eat, and Bruce not wanting to. And of course, if you're familiar with the comics, Alfred bringing Batman food and saying like, "Hey, Master Bruce, you really need to eat something." And then Batman's like, I need to sit here and stare at this computer and try and solve this case, and and then not eat the food that Alfred brings in because apparently reaching for a sandwich is too much of a strain on the brain of the world's greatest detective. But anyway, let me see. But yeah, we also get to see Bruce's reaction to the Balloonman, and basically said what he did made him a criminal as well. So again, we get to see the formation of Batman's code against killing. And people always are complaining like, well, why doesn't Batman just throw the Joker off a roof? Well, here's the thing. Batman believes in that he is responsible for his actions and that he is not responsible for the actions of others. And basically what that means is, if I were to kill the Joker, it would be on me. But what the Joker does is on the Joker. And I don't consider that to be a dodge in any way. It's just a sort of acceptance of reality, is that you can't really control what other people do. You can really only control your own actions. And thus you can only really be responsible for your own actions, for your own choices. But anyway, let me see here. Yeah. Oh yeah. Bruce's whole thing about how that makes him a criminal. Well, that also brings us to what Gordon says, and it's very striking in this episode where he says, "If everybody doesn't matter, then no one matters," and that's what leads us to vigilantes. And he makes this big thing about how vigilantes are bad. And of course, we also know that he's eventually just going to have to accept that, in at least one case, a vigilante is necessary. But that idea that everybody matters or nobody matters, well, that too is also part of very much Batman's morality. So you can't help but wonder if this is an idea that's not also going to rub off on Bruce. And I love the idea of Gordon being someone who's just as instrumental in shaping Bruce Wayne into becoming Batman as Alfred was. So yeah, I think that's a pretty cool idea. Let's kind of round things out and finish talking about the Gotham City PD folks. Nothing particular to say about Lieutenant S and Now, nothing, and again, not a huge amount to say about Allan. Just he and Montoya. I love how they're constantly just on Gordon and Bullock's cases because they do seem to be some of the other genuinely good cops in Gotham. They just have a terrible tendency to bark up the wrong tree and go after things like without evidence. I mean, Gordon, they even try and confront Gordon. They're like, hey, we know that you killed Cobblepot, but we're going to give you this chance to confess. And Gordon's like, F you, where's your evidence? And just the idea that Montoya and Allan actually thought like Gordon was going to be like, oh, you got me. Yeah, I totally killed Cobblepot because Carmine Falcone told me to. You got me. You got me. I guess I'm off to Blackgate Prison. What the hell? I mean, are these two supposed to be smart? We get to see Barbara and Renee interact, and it's basically confirmed that yeah, there was some girl on girl stuff going on between those two at some point, and it hints that both the two of them might have had some addiction problems. Now, Montoya even says, "I've been clean, I've been sober for a year." Well, this does mirror her character counterpart in the comics' battle with alcoholism, but it kind of implies this episode that maybe their struggles with probably drugs might have gone back to when they were much younger and involved. And I love kind of like I just love the idea of Commissioner Gordon's girlfriend's apparently smoking weed in his apartment. Uh, well, whatever state Gotham City is located in, it's probably not Colorado, huh, folks? Actually, the preponderance of the evidence in the comic books, at least in the modern era, seems to strongly indicate that Gotham City is located somewhere in New Jersey. In fact, there was a comic, Shadow of the Bat, Annual 1 for the comic book geeks out there, where you saw a driver's license of a Gotham resident that listed him as living in Gotham City, New Jersey. So, basically, as I said, Gotham is heavily implied to be in New Jersey, probably northern New Jersey, but it's not 100% continuity in canon that that's true. But anyway, apart from her interactions with Renee, not a huge amount to say about Barbara, but I do like that they're giving her kind of. I mean, we aren't going to have to worry about her just being Gordon's really supportive girlfriend, which is good. It makes her certainly a much more interesting character, but I do like the fact that she never seriously doubted Gordon, not even for a moment. Now, granted, she just kind of pressed him on this a little bit, just as like, kind of a, hey Jim, what's going on here? But not in an accusing way. And it is really nice to see that she has faith in him like this, because Jim's gonna need that. But anyway, we still have to talk about Bullock. And this episode, keep in mind, at the end of it, Bullock is totally like cool with letting the Balloonman float off into the air. Now think about this for a minute. Bullock is totally cool with just flat out murdering a guy. And then Gordon is just like, oh hey, thanks for saving me, partner. It's like, Jim, your partner just tried to kill a suspect. Why are you not getting in his face? Now, granted, you're just glad to be alive, but it's seriously, how are you letting this slide? It's just. And yeah, obviously next week we're going to find out a little bit more about what's going on with this whole Arkham thing. Obviously Arkham with the Batman Arkham City, Batman Arkham Asylum, Batman Assault on Arkham, the direct-to-video animated movie that came out in August, which I have incidentally reviewed here on this channel, for those of you who might be curious. Obviously an enormous part of the Batman mythology, and I'm very interested to see what they've got going on there. So let me see, is there anything else that I've missed? No, again, this is only 3 episodes in, so we're still being introduced to characters like, for example, Maroni. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about Selena Kyle, but again, not a huge amount to say about her this episode. So basically, we're still being introduced to people. Things are starting to move around, but I have a feeling we're in for some big payoffs fairly soon. I can't imagine that something big isn't going to happen by episode 6 or 7. So, with that, folks, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.